Welcome to Rogue Bogues, Basketball Episode 3. I'm Andrew Bogut, and we have the big fella on the other line, Pro, Mike Procopio. How you going, man?
Bogues, I just want to let you know, with my 7 actual followers, they let me know about the podcast. They said we're the only podcast ever that they don't know what the fuck we're talking about. They can't understand us. We actually need subtitles. So I called Google to see if they could figure that out to actually have subtitles on an audio show.
We can try our best. Even if we do, might get one of those, might have to do some video and get one of those people on the side that does a sign language, because we both mumble at the best of times. You have a lisp, I have a thick Aussie accent that's all over the place. So, we've just got to make sure that the listeners are attentive.
No doubt.
So, interesting week. How was your Christmas first off?
Christmas was great. Watch the kids open up presents I can't afford. And then ingested about 27,000 calories. It's not bad. It's an off day for me, but it's all good.
That's what it's all about, though.
How about you, man?
You're supposed to join a gym on January 1st, so make sure you do that like everybody else. We're good.
Actually, I have it set. January 33rd, I'm actually starting it up.
Yeah, we were good here. Kept it low-key with the kids. Last year, we went a little crazy with the presents, and this year we kind of kept it a little bit more tame. So made them actually give away a lot of their old toys to get new toys. So that's kind of a cool thing that I'm doing, because otherwise, not only do they have too much shit in the house, I think they don't appreciate what they have. So we're trying to make sure that they cherish the items they get. Moving on, let's go NBA. So we'll get started. We spoke about, we had some messages going backwards and forwards during the week. I guess the elephant in the NBA, or the elephant in the room, for a number of reasons, is James Harden and his escapades. Obviously, coming into training camp was an issue. He showed up late. There were rumors he wasn't going to report to try and leverage his way out of there. So it wasn't a great start for Houston. New coaching staff trying to reset their identity. So not a good start for them. And now we come to learn that he has breached COVID protocol. He was found to be photographed or videoed at what looked to be a strip club. It looked pretty nightclub-ish with some dancing on the background, but he denies that. But he broke protocol. I guess where we'll start is the hypocrisy around the NBA's decision. So a quick quote from Adam Silver: James Harden was not suspended because the precedent is that discipline gets ratcheted up. It's Christmas. It was a first offense. In a way, he got lucky. If the game had been played, Harden would have been docked 1 game's pay, so he saved some money for not getting a game suspension. But let's rewind back to the bubble, where we had a similar situation. Daniel House Jr. suspended, basically booted out of the bubble. Effectively, I'm pretty sure, allegedly he banged, or got intimate, would be the politically correct word, with one of the testers at the resort that tested your temperature when you were coming into the resort. I think he took down one of those ladies, had a bit of fun, and ended up getting booted. And now you've got James Harden, who does something probably even worse, knowing the current climate, and just gets basically, I think it was a $40,000 fine. How do you see all that?
At the bubble, I actually thought that was a pretty good thing that they did. They set precedent that, hey, look, you gotta follow the rules, or that's not going to be tolerated. We're going to send you home. The problem is now that you have a player who's one of the top 5 in the league does somewhere in the same thing. He's breaking protocol. And I think the wording sets a bad precedent, to be honest. So it's Christmas time and it's first offense. Like, I think, in my opinion, Bogues, I don't know what you think. I think you have to set an example, because I think the problem is, what if Yogi Ferrell does this? Or what if,
Daniel House does this? Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel House did. And that's probably what they're going to be thinking, is this guy gets 40 grand and doesn't miss any games. And I'm going to get, what if I get 85,000 or 100,000? And they want to set an example. So I think that it's important. This is a very important thing that everybody in the world's dealing with COVID and trying to follow rules. And they put out like a 500-page memo, or whatever it was, on giving you all the rules of what you can and can't do. And I just think that you got to follow them. And I think you have to be really serious about this, and you have to set precedent where you're not going to, it doesn't matter if it's the best player in the league or the worst player in the league. You're going to set an example right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think the hypocrisy is the loudest thing. We were both discussed yesterday. The thing we noticed watching NBA telecasts, for those that haven't watch a game. So the NBA benches are spaced out. They're socially distancing the bench of an NBA game. The players are socially distancing. if you look in the background, there's 10, 15, 20 water coolers. So I assume each player gets their own individual water from a specific cooler. So you're not sharing. I don't know how that helps things because you usually just fill up a cup. But anyway, so I guess the eye test from the NBA's point of view is we're doing everything right. Now, let's remember these players are on a team bus in close quarters going to and from the arena. They're on chartered airplanes, which is pretty much impossible to social distance because your plane's pretty full with gear and with trainers and coaches. So it's just laughable considering the statement coming out from Adam Silver. But then, with the eye test and aesthetically, let's make this look like we're adhering to everything. How hard do you laugh at all that?
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's if they're trying to do everything right, then obviously what Harden did is wrong. And I think you have to come down hard on it. And if you're trying to do everything the right way, then this comes into that sort of effect where it's the same neighborhood. It's you have to really be hot on this stuff. And then I thought they went a little soft on it, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think the precedent needs to be set just because it's going to happen again down the track. Teams, let's say, flying into Miami. They've got 2 off days before their game or 2 off nights. It's a recipe for disaster. You already know, players struggle. It's known players struggle with their own company. A high percentage of professional athletes in general, but especially NBA players, they struggle to just sit in the room by themselves. It's fact, it's reality, whether you like it or not. And I can tell you, when you go to Miami or LA and you're a player playing for Indiana or a small city where you don't have much to do, you're going to go out in those cities. So I think this will show up again, and it's going to be interesting for us to watch from afar how that all works out.
Yeah, and another thing, Bogues, I feel bad for Oklahoma City because they did everything right. They, obviously none of their players tested positive. They didn't have any issues. Houston does it where they've got, 7 players that are eligible because everyone else got COVID, and the game didn't get forfeited like it would maybe in the NFL or, whatnot. They just basically postponed the game. And if I'm Oklahoma City, I'm like, wait a minute, we did everything right. And these guys didn't.
And it would have been most likely a win for OKC because the postponement now means that Houston will probably have a full roster when they play that game again.
Yeah, and he lucked out because that would have been $500,000 that James Harden would have had to miss if that game actually went on or had a forfeit. It's weird all around if you're looking at it from many angles on it.
Do you think he paid his $40K fine in $1 bills?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
High chance, I think. Oh, that's a fine. Phone going off in the background.
Yeah, sorry. That's Adam Silver saying that I'm banned from the league.
You'll be right. One other thing that was interesting, James Harden was asked a question before this whole debacle. It was a pretty easy question by the media, so it's basically touching on everything that's been going on in the media. I don't know if you saw KD's interview with Inside the NBA and Charles Barkley. It was a pretty interesting interview, so if people want to go out there and search for it, it was basically he gave them absolutely nothing, wouldn't answer any of their questions, was one word answered. And then James Harden was asked if he feels better about the Houston situation now that he's in training camp. This was last week, and his answer was next question. So, it's just a matter of time, right, before he gets moved.
Yeah, he'll get moved pretty quickly. Yeah, they're going to try to. I'd be surprised if he's with the team past February 1st, if not much quicker than that. The relationship between players and media, especially iconic players or high-end players, where they, say next question or they're sort of cold to the media. Now, it sets a bad precedent for them too. It's not a professional thing. I understand sometimes in the media you have hack jobs that are just trying to get under your skin, but the media is a big reason why they're making their money that they are. Those guys cover them, and men and women cover them, and they try to do, they have a job to do. And if you're just sitting there not giving them anything. Now, I know I think with Durant, he was upset that Barkley went at Kyrie Irving like a day or two before about how he thinks he knows everything. And I think that he was just sort of standing up for a teammate. But you look back, if you watch Michael Jordan his last year, when he got killed by the media every day with those same questions of, are you going to run it back? Are you guys going to re-sign your players? And he answered it. He didn't hide from the media. And I think that's a great, Michael Jordan was the ultimate professional with that. And I think when you're handling the media as a player, you have to hit it head on. Sometimes you're going to be critiqued. It's not going to be good. And, they have a job to do too, to critique you as a player. And I think you just sort of have to handle it. Now, if it's a hack job and they're really just trying to, TMZ you and they're just trying to get a soundbite, that's different. But a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of animosity sometimes that happens in these press conferences.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the head. The NBA is not at the point where it is today without the media access that it grants. And I spoke about that on episode 1. There is some negatives to that, but for the most part, I think the positives outweigh it because it's filling up bank accounts. I mean, the NBA from where it was 15, 20 years ago to where it is now, you just jump on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. It's the NBA does a great job of giving access to everyone, even some random ass bloggers sometimes that probably don't have a big following, but the way they see it is the more people talking about the game, the more people watching, the more money we make, the more the players make. So I think, it is a fine line. I think there is the clickbaiters and all that kind of stuff, but you got to at least be somewhat respectful, especially of a national TV show like Inside the NBA. Segue in that, I put out a tweet last week about CAA agency specifically represents a bunch of players and media talent. It's not very well known. It's known in the industry, but not known publicly. So essentially, I said, does it surprise you that certain players have more positive press, more positive stories? It's clear as day once you know what to look for. So the interesting thing, once I put that tweet out, I had a lot of journalists, more than I thought, reach out to me and basically said that we commend you for calling it out. It's an issue, but even what you stated is the bare minimum. It's much worse than I even tweeted and spoke about. So I since found out that CAA, who represent Woj and are involved with Woj, they heavily run ESPN at the moment. So the hirings and firings are dictated by, at least for the basketball part of ESPN, by CAA. So much so that there's a few talented people that have been let go by ESPN as full-time employees, but funnily enough, ESPN values them enough to bring them back at a per day basis or a subcontractor basis because they want them to be involved, but they had to kind of do it for political reasons. And it's an interesting dynamic because people forget that then these CAA, the media talent, they then vote on all the big awards. So they generally will vote on all NBA, MVP, all defensive. They have a lot of power, and conflict of interest is pretty high. And human nature tells you that, if you can make your own agency more money or you get told, help our guy out, money talks, bullshit walks. I mean, you're probably the first you've heard of it, but it's something that I've been watching from afar, and you can factor Clutch Sports into that, but in a little bit of a different aspect, not so much with the media, but the fact that they can actively recruit through LeBron. I mean, how do you see all this kind of the way the landscape is today?
I don't know a lot about the media stuff. It's the first I've sort of, when you were tweeting about it and then we were talking about it, it's the first I've sort of heard about it. It's sort of not my realm, but what's more valuable than money these days is power. And these agencies are just trying to surround themselves, representing players, representing media. It's sort of like why owners buy NBA teams. You as an owner, you buy a team. Now teams are really expensive now, but if you bought a team 10 years ago and you bought a team for $400 million, and basically it's a PR firm for you because you can get interviewed before games, you can talk to the media, you could put out any message that you want, and you have power. That's real power that you really can't buy. A lot of these owners that have all this money, that they're not going to be interviewed before, if they don't have teams, they're in the public spotlight. So with the agencies, hey, I mean, if they're doing that have people that they control, that have these, they vote on these awards and they interview their people. I mean, it's just, that's what people are, in most sports are doing in walks of life. They're trying to acquire more power, and it's just how it is. Clutch, same thing. Clutch, they have all these players. They got LeBron who's recruiting for them, and they have the stable of players. When free agents become available, they could funnel them to him if the situation presents itself, like an Anthony Davis. And so it's, the more things that you could impact in the NBA, you could sort of help your clients, and you could have just more power, and you have more sections of your company that just gives you more and more power. And that's a big thing that probably no one really thought about 10 years ago, that that they're getting smart and they're representing more people in more entities around the league. And now they have more power for their players. And now when you're recruiting players and you're a big commodity as far as an agency, and you're recruiting a draft pick, that a smaller agency that's just one person that does a good job, but you say, hey, wait a minute, look, our agency can get you voted on teams. We can get you more money. We can get you more power. So that's a big feather in your cap as an agency if you can control that.
I mean, I don't fault the agencies themselves for doing it. I think it's in the best interest of their business. But I think when you look at the average fan would have no idea. They would just be, blinded to what we're discussing right now. And every year it's like clockwork. Every year when the All NBA teams are announced and the MVP, there's always a few people in the media that just have these strange votes out of left field, that are just like, how is that guy even in the running for a vote? And you come to realize that some players might have something in their contract that says if you garner a vote, you get a bonus. If you got to kind of dig deep with some of this stuff, and it is pretty awkward to talk about at times, but it is a reality. And I think there is a whole lot of conflicts that you need to look for. I mean, the other one is the Clutch Sports thing. LeBron, it's known that he's an active investor, I don't know to what capacity, with Clutch. It's strictly prohibited in the MBPA agreement. It's outlined in black and white that you cannot be an active participant, an agent, or involved with an agency, have business interests in an agency and be in an NBA locker room as a player. But, I'm not sure if it's because it's LeBron that it's allowed or if people are scared or whatever it is, but it comes down to, what's the point in having rules if they're enforced for one? Like you said, if Yogi Farrell opens his own agency and he's actively recruiting people in a locker room, would he get pulled up? I think he would. It's like, I think there's a bit of a double standard there, but just for all the fans listening, dig deep and do some research, and you'll figure things. Sometimes there's a bigger story than just why do they vote for this person or why did this player sign with this team? And that's just the unfortunate reality of, like you said, all walks of life, all businesses. But you'd like to think that sport is different and a bit more pure, but I guess that's just the reality of the world today.
Bogues, there's a famous college coach that passed away. His name was Jerry Tarkanian, that coached at UNLV. He had a great quote when UCLA was blatantly cheating in the 70s and, with getting the players that they did. He goes, when the NCAA is pissed off at UCLA, they take it out on Utah Valley State. They always get the smaller guy. They never get the actual person who's doing it if it's a big commodity, and they always say that. Hey, look, I'm sure that LeBron had 88 lawyers looking into it and sort of going through every loophole they needed to do to make sure all their I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And it's sort of legal, but like you said, if a smaller player that tried to do the same thing, I think that he'd probably have a lot more red tape to deal with and probably not going to be able to do it. It just sort of goes to show you what LeBron, like him or not, the guy's, sort of turned himself into one of the more powerful NBA players that ever lived while he was still playing. Like Jordan made a lot of money, but he didn't have a lot of power like that, where he has an agency and affiliated with an agency and did all this. And he made most of his money probably after he played with his Jordan brand. LeBron's got, sponsorships. He's got his own career. He's got a media company. He's got the agency. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And the player empowerment thing that he sort of created in a movement that he's pushed, I don't think the league's going to touch him. The league won't touch it with him, especially. But I think he's probably he figured out how to do it and loophole through it. And with his name, the NBA is probably not going to touch it.
Yeah, no doubt. And he has done a fantastic job with building what you'd call an empire, both on and off the court. But it is something that most fans probably gloss over and don't even notice, but that's just what we're dealing with.
I mean, just think about it. Like, he has the agency, right? Like, not only can he get big time players to come to him if they have the salary cap like Anthony Davis, but filling out his roster. He could fill out the roster with legitimately making the decisions of, hey, I need to bring this guy in, this guy in, this guy in. They're all clutch guys. They're guys that we need, and I want to get clutch guys in to help my people. I'll tell you what, I've never seen an NBA player have more loyalty to his people, to his like friends and people that he's around. I mean, just goes out of his way to get clutch guys on the roster and things like that. It's amazing that he basically not runs the team, but sort of runs the team.
Yeah, and I mean, there's commissions involved as well, and there's bottom lines that help the company, and obviously his childhood friend and best friend, Rich Paul, run that company. But he does definitely go to bat for you if you're in Team Clutch. Which I guess when I first came in the league, it was big agents were the way to go. So it was you had to sign with a big agency, a big name. At the time, for me, it was SFX, and that's who I was with. But there was, a bunch of other agencies. And then it kind of started to shift, I guess, probably 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. It started to shift because if you were a middle tier player in these big agencies, you were getting the crumbs. You were getting all the marketing deals would go first to the superstar. And then if he didn't want it, it'd go down the chain. So these middle tier kind of, not superstar, but I'd say star, second, third option guys on teams, they started to get pissed off and they started leaving these big agencies and going to a small mom and pop type setup, an agent that had maybe 3 or 4 clients. He'd pick up your call whenever you called. He wouldn't bullshit you or she. And I think it changed to that, but now it's kind of starting to swing back the other way again. It's starting to go back to, if you're not with a Clutch or a CAA, it's very hard to get traded out of a bad situation. It's very hard to drum up interest in free agency if you're restricted or unrestricted. So for me, just watching it from afar, it's been interesting how it's swung kind of backwards and forwards the last 20 years.
Yeah, where you really need the big agent is when you're a restricted free agent. I've dealt with a lot of situations with players that I've been friends with or dealt with, and they were the smaller agent, which I don't mind. I think that, with agencies, Clutch probably could turn a $3 million player into an $11 million player. They've done it before, but like most people aren't going to get you all that much more money. But if you're a restricted free agent where teams know that your team is going to match your salary and they don't want to waste their money and get it tied up for three days during free agency, if you don't have a big agency that could call another team and say, look, if you want to sign X player, you better make an offer to Y player on the Brooklyn Nets. So they forced to match to give him a big raise, because the teams are just going to take advantage of it. Teams are going to give you the lowest dollar if they know that no other team's going to match, no other team's going to give you an offer sheet. That's when you need a bigger agent. But also, it's unbelievable with guys that are have smaller agents, where people in locker rooms sort of say, hey, why are you with X agent? And I always tell players, look, this player was the one, this agent was the one who was helping you when all these other agents wouldn't return your call. Now that you're good, that these other agents are gonna, now they're gonna talk to you, and you're gonna leave your agent when it's time to get paid. There are plenty of agents out there, Bogues, that take advantage of smaller agents. The smaller agent probably has to pay, probably $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 in expenses to players that they don't get any money on in their rookie deal. And then these other bigger agencies, if that player does well, swoops in right before they have to do the extension, has them fire the smaller agent, and then they take say they get a $40 million deal in their extension. Now that's a $1.6 million, payday for the agent that they didn't have to do any work to get. And this other agent that sort of was with you the whole way, paid all this money. They, gave you the pep talks. They were the one that was with you. And then they're caught holding the bag for 90, 80, 90, 100,000. And they get screwed out of it. It's a weird dynamic.
It's a nervous time for small agents when a player's on their rookie deal and coming out of that rookie deal, because for that exact reason. So I went through it. I was with SFX and then stayed with my agent, David Bauman, who will get on the pod one day. But he's kind of like a medium tier agent. He wasn't bells and whistles. That's what I liked about him. He picked up my calls when I called. He helped with a lot of off the court stuff. And he wasn't a $10,000 suit agent. He was just kind of just a regular guy for the most part, dressed nice and everything, but wasn't bells and whistles, wasn't pulling up in the Maserati or the Ferrari. And that was why I stayed with him. And that exact same thing happened to me when it was extension time for me with the Milwaukee Bucks, which I ended up signing a 5-year, $60 million at that time. Right before that, I had a bunch of agents coming to me basically doing that, saying, hey, why are you with this small guy? He's not doing enough for you and all that kind of stuff. And I told my agent, as soon as they came up to me, I said, hey, just so you know, this agency's trying to poach me, and just FYI. And it's a dirty game, man. It's a dirty game. But I'll give you a funny story about what you just said about the you probably know about this story, the restricted free agency thing and other teams bidding up teams' restricted free agents. Do you remember the Jared Jeffries story?
No, I know Jared pretty well, but no, I don't know the story.
So apparently when he was with Washington, Washington loved him and wanted to keep him. He was a restricted free agent. So I guess New York had done exactly what you said. They said that they offered him a deal that was going to mess up Washington's cap. I don't know what it was at the time. I don't know. It was 4 years 20 or 4 years 24, whatever it was. I don't know the numbers, but basically offered a deal to say, let's mess with Washington a bit. And then Washington, they didn't match. so apparently New York then obviously brought him in, but I think they had like 4/5 men playing in Jared's position, who was then molding to more of a 4 spot, like a point forward. But that's just an interesting story that I heard along the way that someone told me. And I mean, that kind of stuff can happen sometimes too.
Yeah, look, like with Kevin Durant or James Harden, being an agent for them is pretty easy. It's going to be an open and shut deal, right? When I was with Grover, we would do pre-draft training, right? And we would work out guys right after the college season's over, getting ready for the NBA draft. And we charged about $10,000 or so to per guy to work out with us. And that's not counting expenses like living expenses, food, and all that stuff. So you would have all these like middle of the road guys that are borderline draft guys, and they would sign with these big agencies. And the big agencies may or may not pick up the $10,000. But I would talk to the player and I'd be like, what do you got going? Well, he goes, this big agent's going to get me in the second round of borderline first. And I'm looking at myself. I said, I don't think this guy can get drafted to go to the fucking army. What are you doing? So, and then what happens is, like they promise them this, they promise them that, and then the guy doesn't get drafted. They stop taking their calls and they end up like getting some jacked up like European job at the end, and not even a good European job, or they go to the D League, and that's why sometimes having the smaller agent or the agent that has a lot of, like Mark Bartelstein is really good at turning, getting middle of the road guys and getting them paid either in the NBA or getting them great European deals. Like you need an agency, and he's a bigger agent, obviously, but like sometimes going to a bigger agent, if you're like a fringe player, isn't the way to go because you're going to get lost in the shuffle. And that's why, but in some cases, if you're a restricted free agent, you're going to be pretty good. I would go to a Clutch or I would go to some of these bigger companies because they definitely have a few GMs on their not payroll, but on their speed dial that would be like, hey, look, they can get that, 4-year, $40 million deal for that restricted free agent when the team that they're dealing with is like, hey, they're only offering my guy $5 million a year. I need that bump to $10 million a year. I need you to do me a favor. And they will match it. So don't worry about it. But sometimes, like you said, it might be a Jared Jeffries deal where he ends up getting screwed. But
well, he didn't get screwed. I mean, he still got his money, but it was just more the kind of where the Knicks were at, or where they've been the last 20 years. They're messing in other people's affairs when their own team wasn't that strong, and it actually backfired. On them. I think that was when they went through the Zebo era, and I think David Lee was there at the time. They just had a bunch of players that just didn't fit, and it was kind of 1 year in, 1 year out. I mean, the agency thing is it's a whole different world that people. You hear it's slimy, but yeah, like you said, I've had some real good friends and teammates that were middle to low tier players that just missed out on getting drafted, and then, like you said, their agents just stopped taking their calls, and they're just like, they kind of push you towards signing with someone else because they just don't want to deal with those low level European deals. And I guess the human element of that, where they're telling you you're the best thing when they're recruiting you, and then all of a sudden your stock drops and they just disappear. It just hurts your soul sometimes, man. It just really does. Like it just, because it's such a fiscal industry. And look, from the agent's point of view, like you said, they don't want to be left holding the bag and covering these players that they know aren't gonna make the money back. So it's a tough situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of like these smaller agents paying a first round pick $150,000 just to sign with them because he's a small agent and needed to, because he lost all these players over the years in recruiting because he didn't have anybody on his sheet. So he ends up paying this kid $150,000, and the kid, pays the kid, and then the guy signs with them, and about 2 weeks later he leaves them. And it's not exactly where you're an agent saying, going online and saying, tweeting out, hey, this guy owes me $150,000. You just broke a law. So, it's hard. It's hard being a smaller agent because these bigger agencies, look, if you're a bigger agency and you're representing, say, $1 billion in contracts and you're getting, say, 2% of that, you could afford to pay out players and recruit them and wine and dine them, because you're going to make, you're going to get $2 billion, $1 billion at 2 or 3%, of your commission. So you could afford to have this sort of expense going. If you're a small guy that only has like 10 guys in Europe and maybe 2 guys in the D League, you're not making a lot of money. You might be making 70 grand a year. And if someone is asking you for 150, in a credit card and a credit, and a credit rating that you have to go out and get them credit and pay for that could put you in the poorhouse. So yeah, these big conglomerates, it's unbelievable that what they're doing as far as what they have for players and some of the power they have around the league.
Yeah, it's something we're going to deal with. It's just the way it's going. And it's even joining into Hollywood now. A lot of these sports agencies now are linked with Hollywood agencies and whatnot. But anyway, what have we learned the first couple of games? What have you seen? I'm sure you were on the couch for a long period watching these NBA games over Christmas, as I was. And what have we learned the first couple of games?
Well, I definitely learned don't try to eat a whole lasagna in one half of basketball. That's not going to be pretty beneficial for anybody.
I thought you were going to say one mouthful.
Oh no! Well, yeah, half a tray of lasagna or one mouthful. It's about the same for me. The Lakers and Clippers are really good. They're above and beyond anyone else right now. The way they're playing, the Lakers I know they're 1-1, but like the problem with the Lakers, just like most good teams, they're not really going to show up fully until it's either A, a big game, or B, like closer to the playoffs. But what they did in their second unit with, Montrezl Harrell, they just, Schroeder. I mean, they've got, they got great, obviously they got great with those 2 guys with LeBron and AD, but the bench they have, and when they turn it on, they're really good. And then the Clippers, I mean, if they can keep everything together and everybody healthy, they're going to be really good. I watched the Greek Freak against Golden State. Golden State's really struggling.
We might be in some trouble with that pick.
Yeah, no bench, lack of firepower. They paid, Oubre, they paid $82 million. With his contract, they had a trade exception, so they got him from Phoenix. But with the tax, they ended up paying $82 million for this kid. And I just like without Klay Thompson, and obviously you don't have Kevin Durant either. Like you don't have, I don't care about the Kevin Durant deal, but like you don't have that other superstar to give you the firepower. And Draymond's a little banged up. It's going to be really tough for them. But I'll tell you what, Wiseman is really good. I think Wiseman is going to be a really good player. He seems like he's someone who they could work with, and they could take him. In a couple of years, he'll be pretty good. But with Milwaukee, same thing. The lack of shooting from Giannis, that he needs to really address that, because it's going to be a problem. It's not going to be a problem during the regular season. He'll put up his 28, 12 and do well, and they'll win games in the regular season. But like you said in our last pod, it's in the playoffs. They're going to force him to shoot the ball. They're going to get him to the free throw line, and he's going to have to convert. And, he's struggling, man. He's struggling at the line. I think he was like 7 for 15.
Hit some threes last game, though, and some step backs, which was interesting. I mean, the danger with a player like Giannis that we have seen in the past with guys that attack the rim really well is, do they then start to settle for that too much? I mean, I don't know what he went. I think he shot, was it 4 for 9 from 3 or 3 for 7? I mean, it was a decent clip considering how hard some of the shots were. But is he, I think, are we overemphasizing the shooting from 3, that it gets to a point where then he becomes too comfortable with it? I think it will dry up when the big games come to town, like the playoff games, and it becomes much more physical. But you also, at times during that game, he didn't attack as much because they were just they were dare shooting him to that 3 or that pull up, and he took it and was knocking it down. But, I don't know if we'll see that all year.
Yeah, I mean, just as you know, Bogues, 72 games is a long time. It's a lot of games. You could have some success in small doses, but I mean, it's only a couple of games. But right now he's shooting 27 from the 3 and 56 from the line. So, but the free throw is the biggest thing for him. He's got to make them. The threes. Hey, look, if you're going to be a 30% 3-point shooter, you could still survive, especially with someone with talent like his. In the playoffs, it'll be tough, but they're going to wrap him up. And if it starts getting to his head with, shooting 55, 58 from the line, it's going to be tough. Look, he's got two bad things that he does. His head goes back, on a shot, and he's got a flat shot. And I think, I just remember Rondo, like Rondo came to us in Dallas, he was shooting about 50 from the line. Now he worked with a couple of our coaches, with his shot. And then finally at the end, we got together and we just had a lot of arc to his shot, didn't change anything, but just his arc was a lot higher. He ended up shooting like 74 from the line in his last 20 games. And I think that is something he needs to experiment with, because he shoots a line drive. I mean, if you're JJ Redick and you're shooting a line drive, that's one thing. You're one of the best 3-point shooters of all time. But when you're someone who's struggling with technique and you got a flat shot and your technique's off, it's going to be tough for him to be consistently making shots. Let me see, who else did I watch? Oh, I watched New Orleans play on Christmas Day, and we watched him play Miami. Zion, I mean, he's, and any night he can give you 32 and 12, 32 and 13, but I think he had 32 and 14 for the game. But again, making basketball plays from the perimeter because of him and Adams in the court at the same time. Lonzo Ball, you don't know if he's going to be consistent shooting the ball. So your spacing is only going to be dictated by Ingram and Redick. So if those two guys aren't killing it from three, it puts a lot of pressure on you if you have three guys that are inconsistent shooters. Obviously, Adams ain't a shooter. He doesn't need to be. Zion's, I don't think he has the confidence right now. Sometimes, if he gets it going, maybe. And then you got, Ball, who can make them occasionally, but I just think they're going to have some spacing issues for sure. They're going to, like you said on the last pod, you're going to have to play Zion at 5 at some times. I'm a huge Steven Adams fan, so I wouldn't want him off the floor that long, but you're going to come into some, times where, you're going to need shooting on the floor, and you're going to need that space around the court opened up.
And they've only got one. The only no-leave guy really is JJ, right? I mean, the other guys are streaky. Ingram's very streaky. I mean, he can go 0 for 5 or go 4 for 5. Ball's the same. But, I mean, JJ is really the only guy, spacing-wise, that you're like, do not leave under any circumstances. Even if he's 0 for 10, you're not leaving him. So they don't really, Josh Hart, I mean,
no.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's definitely the elephant in the room for him.
It's going to be tough for them. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I always get jealous when you say the elephant in the room, because that's obviously me, but that's why sometimes I don't know who you're talking about.
We're gonna get hate mail for fat shaming yourself, so just be careful.
Self-deprecating. What are they going to do?
Are you allowed to do that these days? You might get in trouble though.
I mean, look at me. I'm an unemployed mutant lookalike 500-pound mutant. I mean, what are they going to do to me?
Hard to cancel.
Yeah, I've been canceled since birth. I mean, so what the fuck are they going to do to me?
So I ended up watching the Dallas game. I thought they didn't look great yet. There's rumors that Luka came in a little bit out of shape. He's a little pudgy, which I think is the norm for him throughout his career. He's had that issue in preseasons, and then always within a couple of weeks gets it down and he's back firing. But they're obviously, something's missing there. I'm not sure what. They just don't look on the same page, and they potentially could be. They have the Clippers next. I don't know if Kawhi's going to play. There's rumors that he broke his jaw, but they could go 0-3 to start the season. So that's, they're one of the favorites in the West. Yeah,
Luka could get you 40 and 20 every night. So that kid could eat fucking cake all day long. I can give a fuck less. I mean, the guy's just, he comes at you and kills you. I think that they definitely need Porzingis. They need that second star that they can give the ball to and can create offense. I think what they're struggling with, like I said last pod, they got great role players. Dorian Finney-Smith, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber. They got Hardaway. They got Richardson. They've got talent, but those guys are limited to what they can do when you just give them the ball and ask them to be a playmaker or a scorer. So having Porzingis to take pressure off, I don't think Hardaway is consistent enough to be a third option on a team. I think those guys are really good fourth and fifth options. So you have Luka and a bunch of fourth and fifth options, which isn't a bad thing. Those guys are really good at their role, but they need somebody else. And I think Porzingis, his shooting and his ability to score and impact the game, and they'll turn it up defensively. They're going to probably have to do that. I think they got rebounded. They got out-rebounded probably by 15 to 18 rebounds. I don't fact check, but I think it's about 8. They got out-rebounded by about 18 by the Lakers. So, I think they just got to clean some stuff up defensively. They're going to just have to wait until Porzingis comes back. And in the meantime, I think that if I was Tim Hardaway Jr., I would really be trying to work on being consistent every day and giving them that 15 to 18 shooting a high percentage and giving them that third that third scorer. I just think it's tough. They have firepower because they could all make threes, but when they need a basket, Luka's sort of the only guy they can go to. Or Boban. I fucking love Boban when they throw it to him in the post.
Oh man, he's a load down there. The dude's just he's huge and phenomenal touch for a big fella.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Every time you touch it, the guy's like Shaq, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Bill Russell all in one.
Yeah, I think they'll be all right. I think Porzingis will give them an opportunity to. I mean, he likes to catch on the elbow and off the block a little bit too, just to slow things down. It seems like the league is going 99% pick and roll, but I think sometimes where Dallas gets stuck in that herky-jerky pick and roll and they're not finding much out of it, historically last season, they could then really punish that 1-through-5 switch with Porzingis and kind of post him up and you can shoot over anybody. So they generally start slow to start most seasons. So I think they'll bounce back. One we got hate mail for was Houston. I didn't have them in my 8, and I did that based on James being traded and then most likely getting some picks back with some young talent that need to be developed. But that's one that the fans out there have given us some scathing reviews on, that Houston will be there instead of potentially Golden State.
Yeah, I mean, right now, probably how Golden State's playing, I probably wouldn't disagree, but Houston has some issues. Like John Wall has to prove that he can be healthy all year and he can be effective. You don't know what they're going to do with Harden. You don't know if it's, I think they'll be traded pretty soon, but you can't really just guarantee. They've lost some stuff from last year. Austin Rivers is a part of their team. They're a little bit banged up. It's just a different dynamic. I really like Steven Silas as a coach. I was with him in Dallas for a year. He's very, very, detail oriented. He's great with people. That's why I thought if they kept everybody together, they would have been pretty good, because Steven would have stayed out of the way, like, in the sense that let those guys do what they do. He's not going to mess with Harden, or Westbrook, and he could draw anything up in a huddle. He's very organized. He's very good. I just think now, because of people leaving, you don't know what you're going to get in the James Harden deal. If they go to Brooklyn with the deal and they get a bunch of like high-end role players that really aren't difference makers but are good players, like if they get, that'll be different than if they trade for Simmons or they trade for somebody else. I think it will be Simmons, but I can't just say they're going to be an 8, but looking at Golden State or where they are, I think that right now, if I was a betting man, which thankfully I'm not, I'd probably go with Houston, but who knows? It's so
Speaking
early.
of betting man, did you see Charles Barkley and his bet? Did you see that?
$100,000, right?
On Portland? Like what's going on there? So for those that don't know, Charles Barkley went on record and said he will put $100,000 that the Portland Trailblazers will make the NBA Finals, so they'll win the West. And I don't know what he's smoking.
I mean, who the fuck doesn't like Charles Barkley, though? I mean, Barkley's
I love
the best.
him. He gives no shits, but that was one I'm like, is there something we need to know? Is there a girl that he used to know that lives in Portland and he wants to do the finals telecast from Portland for 4 games? There's something more. There has to be something more to it, because, I mean, look, I know Terry Stotts played for him for 2 years. I just think they're just stuck in that 5, 6 to 10 bubble every year. And we played them when I was at Golden State. They're probably their best year where they were competitive and we beat them pretty easily. But they obviously had to keep running into Golden State during the year I was there, and then the big 3 year. So, but I just don't see it. I don't know what they do. I think they need to make some moves down the track, because it's just not working there.
Well, here's the thing. His gambling record, I mean, he's lost a lot of money gambling. I don't know if he'll actually make the $100,000 bet or not, but A, people are talking about it, and B, even if he doesn't do the bet, or he does, and they say they get to the finals and they get hot, like now we could say, well, I said it before, and I think that's a big thing these days, saying that I was the first guy to come up with it. But I fucking love Charles Barkley, man. I could listen to him all day long. He's a funny bastard.
He's an everyday man, isn't he?
Yeah.
He says what a lot of people are thinking. He's doesn't sugarcoat things too much, and he's my kind of guy too.
Did you see his face when
KD?
When Durant didn't answer him?
Yeah.
It was fucking hilarious, man. It was hilarious.
It's like memed all over the internet. Like, yeah, he's awesome. I've met him a few times, and he's exactly how he is off camera too, by the way, for the most part. When I've had interactions with him, he's jovial, he's perky, he's joking, talking shit, and I enjoyed the times I kind of ran into him. But moving on from that, we'll get to hopefully you did your homework and read up on the NBL a little bit. But if you didn't, there were a few issues with our league. We are starting in mid-January, as you know. The 2 New South Wales teams, which is Sydney and Illawarra, that state had a little cluster of COVID, so there's been some shambles where they've had to get them out as soon as possible. I've spoke to the GM there. They're basically moving them to Melbourne, and they're going to base them down there because you can get to other states from Melbourne, Victoria, as of now with no restrictions. There are a few interesting things to note. It now takes the season up to a 36-game total because they're doing a mid-season cup that we spoke about last week. The players took a 50% pay cut going into the season, not knowing that they'd play more games and not knowing there'd be a cup. So more than a few players are pretty frustrated. They took a pay cut without knowing the specifics of what was going on down the track. And then the follow-up to that was the Sydney Kings and Illawarra Hawks are moving to Melbourne. The league is only paying for 20 people to come. So they're basically moving interstate for their whole season and being based elsewhere. And 20 people doesn't get you far, as you know, pro. You've got 12 rostered players, you've got 3 assistant coaches, and then you got a guy that's supposed to be, taking care of the gear. You got the physios, you got a masseuse, you got a media person. So they've left them a little dry, and that's been interesting. But yeah, the 50% thing has been a little bit controversial with players. I mean, my concerns and my opinion on it was that, if this cup goes well and they make some money, maybe they give 10% back or 20% back to the players as a thank you for making it all work. I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I just think with COVID, Bogues, it just puts a monkey wrench in everything. Yeah, I think that it's tough for players because they are expected their salary. They got to take pay cuts. It's sort of like the reverse of the NBA, right? Where the owners are taking a lot of the financial responsibility and the players sort of getting paid most of their regular money. But right now, there's not a lot of options for players. So I would be pissed if I was a player, for sure. But what are they going to do? They don't really have much leverage in this, and they just have to probably do the best they can with it. And, there's really not many other places that they can play. It sucks. It definitely does. But again, with international basketball being in such a, sort of a volatile situation with the finances of things, I just think they're just sort of forced to do whatever the league tells them to do. And They could be pissed, but what's their other option? They can not play and not get paid 0%.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I was on record when this 50% pay cut was introduced. I was for it because my wording basically was everyone's going to eat a shit sandwich because of what's going on with COVID. But I guess just the frustrating thing from the players' point of view is you have to do what you got to do, but you're moving players away from their families for 3 or 4 months in a hub, and you're playing extra games. That I guess that's the frustrating point for the players. But I mean, they'll figure it out. The leagues, hopefully, there's no more cases and spikes within Australia that close the borders, but it's been, like you said, I guess everywhere around the world has different issues with COVID, and we just got to try to navigate 2020, 2021, and hopefully on the other side of it, we can get fans back in arenas and get to all that.
One piece of advice I would say is if a girl knocks on their door asking them to do a COVID test, do not invite her in the room.
Take the temperature before and after. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, do not invite her. Don't let them slide that shit under the door. Do not fucking let her in.
There's a case to be, if you're a home team and you got a big playoff series, there could be some little fireworks you can throw along the way. Send some local dancers as per se to players' rooms and see what happens. That could be some.
Yeah, why not?
A strategic play. Some teams could really ratchet up that home court advantage. But anyway, let's get on to the Q&A. We got 6 more to get through real quick. I'll get it rolling. Pat Keane from Warrnambool, Victoria. Good question I found. It was there a time and day that you realized that you weren't going to get to that 2009-10 All-NBA level again, or as a first, second option on an NBA team again? And how did you go about dealing with that? Do you ever think what could have been with no injuries? So I'll answer the first one. The injuries thing for me, it is what it is. I've been very lucky. I still managed to play 14 years in the NBA, 15 years as a professional. Yeah, I could have went a different direction, but I mean, if I didn't sign with the University of Utah, I could have went a different direction. I mean, the smallest nuances throughout a career and building up your career can change things on the whim. And if you told me I'd have a 14-year NBA career, even if some of it looked like I was running in a straitjacket, I would still take it. But the thing with the 2009, 2010, that was a big transition for me. I was the number one option in Milwaukee basically from 2007-8 to 2011, kind of the franchise guy. And that's where, there's a lot of issues with star players and guys that go to other teams is then sometimes you're asked to buy in to be a role player. And as hard as it was to hear when I first got to Golden State and I wasn't getting as many post touches, I'd be an idiot to say, hey, Clay, I need more touches down there. Hey, Steph, I need more touches. You guys are shooting too much. I'd be out of there on the first plane smoking. So I understood that as from a team aspect that I can still play an important cog. Let me go and get 10 rebounds and block 3 shots and absolutely light up 10 people with some screens, get a moving one every now and then, but free up Clay and Steph, and we've got a chance to be a good team. And once I bought into that, I was happy to become the 3rd or 4th, 5th option on that team. And I guess that's the hardest part for most NBA players is once you've been the top of the mountain on your team and the man on your team, and you're on all the billboards for your said city, and then going to a team where someone might ask you to come off the bench, a la Andre Iguodala, or someone might ask you to, we're only going to play you 20. That's probably the biggest battle you see for most players, right?
Yeah, I mean, Bogues, I'm not going to do this much, but I'll give you a compliment. It's sort of like my wife complimenting the way I look. So she'll throw one every year. What I will say is you're a winning player. I think winning players have to look themselves in the mirror and say, depending on what situation they're in, and they got to go situation to situation, and they're going to see, how am I going to help this team win? You weren't going to help Golden State win with all those superstars, that could shoot the 3 and do what they do by saying, I want 15 post touches on the block. It just wasn't going to help. I mean, what you were going to do is you're going to play make out of the elbow. You were going to roll hard to the rim. You're going to pass. You're going to make great passes when you caught it on rolls. You're going to run the floor. You're going to set great screens, and you figure out ways to win. And a losing mentality is, especially when when you know that you're not at that level anymore where you can demand that, and you continue to try to do it, and you bitch and complain, and you're a bad teammate, you keep complaining to the press. That's not the way winning players work. That's why you and Andre Iguodala, those type of players, you guys are winning players because you both came from superstar situations where you were a star early on, and then later in your career, you have to, you sort of have to transition. And not many players do a good job at transitioning to, how am I going to help this team win? If you're a player, I think that's at any level, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, is this really helping this team win? And the first question you have to ask yourself, is winning really important to you, or do you want to put up numbers? Because that they can't coincide sometimes where you can do both. Not many players can carry a team and win. A lot of players have to be role players to help teams win. That's where I stand.
Yeah, and it's a hard pill to swallow. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's confronting because you get to a new team and you think you're going to be all the hoopla around a trade. We're bringing this player in, he's going to change our franchise. And then they're like, we don't need you to do exactly what you did. We want to tweak it a little bit. And yeah, it takes a day or two for you to realize, like, I'm not going to get those touches. So there's, but at the same time, it took pressure off me to really focus on locking up the paint, being a big voice out there for calling out screens and being an anchor defensively and letting, essentially having a bag of popcorn to throw it to Clay and Steph and watching the 2 of the best shooters in the world do what I can, kind of like a football player at the line, just taking people out left, right, and center to try and get them open. And that was my role. I was happy to do it. I got a championship ring out of it. So good question. Moving on to the next one, Corey Bell from Geelong, Victoria. Draymond Green has on numerous occasions praised you for teaching him how to guard the 5 spot. Obviously, he's super talented with mobility and his wingspan. But what would be the keys to be a successful 5-man defensively that you've passed on to him in regards to positioning to be able to read the play and be in the right spot? So when I was a rookie, I had a veteran named Irvin Johnson, not Irvin Magic Johnson, just Irvin Johnson. He was a 7-footer, played for Seattle many moons ago, and then towards the end of his career, they kind of brought him into Milwaukee when I was a rookie to try and help mentor me. And he was great because he pulled me aside numerous times. The NBA has different rules around, first of all, arm bars. When I came in the league, the post game was big. There was a lot of big dudes, so you had to kind of know how to hold your ground. And he just taught me the nuances of you can have an armbar extended here. You can grab their hip with one arm. You can kind of steer them and get a little cheap push when they shoot a hook shot that the referee doesn't notice. All those little nuances in a game that you can get away with things and not give up as much ground as you should to Shaq and all those kind of things. He taught me. So when I became a veteran and had rookies, I did the same thing to them. It's kind of like passing the torch on of what you've learned is your responsibility then is to do it to the next player. So Draymond was my rookie, and he was, funnily enough, Mark Jackson tried to play him at the 3, which Draymond Green will go on record and say he was 1 season away from a plane trip to Europe and playing in Europe. But then once we figured out we could play him more at the 4 and even the 5 at times the bigger guys he'd struggle with. So it was just a matter of pulling him aside and saying, hey, this is how you can get away from away with things. You can hold here, you can grab here. They don't notice this as much. You might get one of these whistles a game. And then also from a help side perspective, I guess in the NBA, the biggest thing I taught him was if you're a help side defender, especially in the NBA, you've got LeBron turning the corner or Kevin Durant, meet them early because you're going to end up on a poster, you're going to end up getting dunked on. If you think you can meet them at the rim like you did in college, not going to work in this league. So I always stressed that you get 2 feet outside the paint on your help side rotation. If they then throw it to your guy for a layup or a dunk, that's your backside rotation help and you cuss them out. And the beautiful thing of that Golden State Warriors team, we were so in sync that we knew I was always going to go help early. So Andre knew he was going to crack back early on my man and vice versa. But I guess it comes from experience. Draymond's a very high IQ guy, knows his basketball back to front, can read plays on the fly. And to be a good big defender and help side defender, you got to kind of be early. Would you agree with that, Pro?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think it's so important to have, like you said, with Irvin Johnson. In Dallas, we had Zaza Pachulia that would work with Dwight Powell early on in his career. After practice, would play one-on-one, teach him all those things. And I think that Draymond having, and I think he was instrumental to Dwight's development as a post defender. With Draymond being and I think he's got such a great sort of combination of competitor, basketball IQ, and toughness that is going to help. And I think what helps young players defensively too is getting their ass kicked a couple of times where you're making a million mistakes and learning from those mistakes, having coaches that are going to break down film with you and teach you, like, sort of correct your mistakes. And I think that Draymond probably had a learning curve, but he probably had good vets that taught him. And, he ended up being a high-end defender, all NBA defender. And I just think when you have basketball IQ and you could sort of figure out why you do well and why you don't, I think when you have that much of a basketball IQ and competitiveness and you sort of go through the mistakes phase of your career, that you're going to be really good. You just have to sort of be patient and work through it.
Yeah, and just for everyone out there, high IQ basketball players love playing with high IQ basketball players. So Andre Iguodala, very high IQ basketball player, he would lose his shit if you weren't near his level or at least above an average level of basketball IQ. He wouldn't give you the time of day. And I'm talking about he would be on your ass and he would be basically going to management like, get this dude the hell out of here. Like, he doesn't fit in here. And because it does become frustrating if 4 guys are on the same page and that 5th guy is not adept at thinking on the fly and moving quick basketball IQ-wise, it does get a little bit helter-skelter. So thanks for the question. We'll go to 3. Dave from Logan in Queensland. Loving the podcast. The only thing I like about painting the house during my Xmas holidays. So just make sure you concentrate and get all those spots. But which opposing center during your NBA career talked the most trash or the most shit? Is there anyone out there that surprised you the most about what came out of their mouths? For me, it wasn't a center. It was Kevin Garnett. He was... When I came in the league, he was with the Wolves, but he wasn't as chirpy with the Wolves. They weren't that good when I first got in the league. They were kind of dwindling away from their peak. And then he obviously went to Boston. I don't know if you had much to do with him, Pro, but he had a history for going at international players or predominantly white players. Like, he would, especially young guys, if you were a rookie, he'd prod you and poke you and try to gain a reaction to see what you were going to do. And I remember he was talking shit to me one game. I think one of them, the highlights is on YouTube, but I would always do whatever he did to me, I'd do back just as hard. And then he started leaving me alone. He knew that he'd get it back. So he was a guy that talked a lot of shit and did a lot of just, little prodding, little elbow here and there. I remember we were in a jump ball one year and he wasn't in the jump ball with me. He was on the outer circle, kind of ready to box each other out. And he'd stand on my foot before the referee threw the ball up. He'd do shit like that to try and get in your head. So he was probably the biggest. I mean, to be honest, most of the shit talking in the NBA is just the run-of-the-mill, I'll see you after the game threats, which I just laughed my ass off every time I heard because I knew nothing was going to happen after the game. But every now and then you'd see guys have a little scuffle in the parking lot or the loading dock, but maybe 1 out of 1,000 times. So Garnett would be my guy. I mean, I don't know if you've been involved too much with the shit-talking side on court or hearing stuff, but do you have anyone that comes to mind?
Well, first of all, with the Celtics thing, ironically enough, a year after I left the Celtics, they won a championship. They went from a fucking lottery team to the championship. So that shows you.
Recipe for success.
Yeah, you're welcome, Boston. So that's first. Second, I would say not centers, but Garnett was a shit talker. But Russell Westbrook, to me, I mean, he's an angry dude, man. He talks to everybody. He talks to the fucking guy selling nachos, up in the fucking upper deck. He doesn't stop. I mean, I think it just sort of amps him up, and he just keeps talking to everybody. And he was probably one of the worst just guys that are just talking to everyone.
I think it motivates him. I still remember the bubble. Do you remember the bubble last season? Towards the end of the year, the players finally could have their family come to games.
Yeah.
And they've got like the wife and kids sitting sideline. He's hitting a shot and turning around and like cussing the wife and baby out. What the opposing
he's
team
unbelievable.
players, like, just gives no fucks. And that's his motor, right? That's what got him to where he's at. But he's definitely, I can attest, he's an angry man out there for sure.
Kobe loved him. Like, Kobe told me the two players, I think I said this before, the two players that he really loved to play against were Rondo and Westbrook. Ironically, he was talking shit to Rondo's brother. Remember, he got him thrown out?
Yeah.
He got Rondo's brother thrown out.
Yeah.
Kobe says that kid is fucking, Mike, he goes, that kid is fucking angry. And he's one guy that, he matches me as far as intensity. And, he is, and he just keeps talking to everybody. I just think it gets him riled up, and man, is he good. I mean, but Garnett is tough too. Like I worked a camp with Karl Anthony Towns, and right after his rookie year, and Garnett was there for it, and he goes, he just talks shit. He doesn't stop talking. He talks to imaginary players, imaginary people. He just doesn't stop talking. It's pretty interesting, but that fucking Garnett, man, that just sort of got him good. I mean, it's probably just part of his wiring, and that's what he needs.
Especially with 82 games. I think with 82 games, you're game 34 in Indiana, and it's -5 outside. I think a lot of these guys kind of use that to get themselves going more than to go up you. It's more, I need to get myself going. I'm going to try to start a fight with someone or do something. And I've been there before. I've done similar things to try and get amped up, and not so much shit talking, but having a bad game, I might just hard foul someone and stare at them and just see what happens, and hopefully it gets the team going. But thanks for your question.
Yeah, try being the guy that fucks up my Big Mac order at McDonald's. You want to talk about shit talking? But I digress. Go ahead.
Jeremy from Sydney, talk about your relationship with Mark Jackson during your time at the Warriors. I heard it wasn't the best. I wouldn't say it wasn't the best. I had respect for Mark from the point of view that he was part of the culture rebuild for us. He was definitely a cog in all of that. But I think he got us to where we could get, and that was kind of it. Mark, without sugarcoating it, was somewhat running a church recruitment group within an NBA locker room, to put it bluntly. He was very big with religion, which is fine with me. I mean, I have no issue with anyone being religious. I kind of draw the line when it becomes a door-knocking recruiting process, which it kind of felt like at times. But as far as culturally, the guys loved him for the most part. It was misreported that I hated him or didn't get along with him. It was probably more in the middle. I wasn't a huge fan of his, but I definitely didn't love to hate him or anything like that. But funny story for you, Pro. That all stemmed because the group, the NBA is a pretty religious league, as much as people would like to believe it isn't. It's a very Christian league, born-again Christian, that kind of stuff. And Mark Jackson had his own church in LA. So we go out to LA for a road trip, and he basically says, I want... anyone who wants to come to my church are more than welcome. So there was somewhat a theory that you kind of had to buy into that to get minutes or to be well liked within the group. And you know me, Pro, like I'm not buying into any extra bullshit that I don't need to buy into. So they get a bus. And I think I was the only guy, that didn't go. Maybe me and one other guy. I think Ognjen Kuzmic was a European dude, didn't go, and me, right? And Kuz could barely speak English, so they probably put that down to he couldn't even read the schedule properly. But they knew I could read the schedule, so I didn't go. And so then it got spun in the media somehow, to the players in the locker room that I was, into the devil and like a devil worshiper. And no one had ever asked me. I was born and raised Catholic. My father's born-again Christian. Like, I've been religious at times in my life, and no one ever asked me. It was just a matter of, he didn't come to my church, that's disrespectful, everyone else came. And I guess there was some animosity from that because I just didn't buy into that side of things. I was there to work and play basketball. Obviously, buy into team, what we're doing, X's and O's and the culture of it. But as far as the extracurricular activities, like I just didn't buy into it. So that probably caused a bit of tension there. But obviously Mark moved on and then we continued to have success. So an interesting one. You got any comment for me there, Pro?
Shocker that you were the only people that didn't go. It really shocks me on that. But sometimes Bogues with that stuff, and maybe You would say yes or no. I would say that sometimes you just don't work well with people. I mean, I've had it. I had it in Dallas, in places in Boston, and, working with Grover. Like, there are people that you work with that you just don't, you just don't work well with. Now, you get along. Like, if you went out to dinner or whatever, you might get along with. But one end or another, like, when it comes to, like, the job, and especially an NBA season when there's all this pressure, that you don't even see, and you just don't work well with people and with a specific person for one reason or another. So, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do with it. It's just how you're wired versus how they're wired. It's tough, but I think if you bring religion into basketball, and it's sort of like the political thing, right? And we won't even get into it, but like, I just think there's certain things you don't bring into an NBA locker room. You don't bring in, politics or religion, because that stuff, that's a powder keg.
Well, it's anywhere. I mean, politics, religion, and money, right? Don't bring those up at your Christmas dinner or your Thanksgiving dinner. And now as a society, that's kind of the forefront of every conversation.
Yeah, and if they're going to force it on you, and you're going to think that you could play more minutes by sort of going to his church, I'd call bullshit too, to be honest with you. I'll be like, this is not anything to do with what we're trying to do here. If you want to go to the church, great. If you want to do that, awesome. But don't force it on me. And if I want to go, I'll go. If not, I won't go. But yeah, I would be a little uncomfortable with that, to be honest with you as well.
I wasn't even that uncomfortable. Like, to be honest, I just did my own thing. It was like, fuck, like, I respect if you want to go and want to have your little thing and 5 or 6, 10 players go, cool. Like, I'm just not going to go. I'm going to go get my meal and chill out in my room. But I didn't think it'd cause issues, but apparently it did. But yeah, I agree. I think those 3 topics, they're causing a lot of issues in society today, as we can see when we look out our window and watch our TVs. But that's a whole story for another day.
No question.
Simon from Miranda, New South Wales. Type in Andrew Bogut fight, and there's quite a few videos that come up. Just wondering if there's any lingering beef after an altercation, or is it more a team-specific thing? And the example, funnily enough, that's why I chose this question, was Warriors versus Clippers over the years, playing each other so much. So little story with that. When I got traded from Milwaukee to Golden State, I didn't play that half of the year. I'd broken my ankle. So that was 11-12 season. So going into 2012-13, I also was still rehabbing. I had a microfracture on my ankle that was supposed to be a year rehab. So I missed a lot of that year. But I started to notice the Clippers were Lob City at that time. So a pretty intimidating team to go into their building. They're throwing lobs. Everyone was shitting themselves about being on a Blake Griffin poster. You got Chris Paul talking shit and his old swagger and that whole deal. And they had a couple of tougher guys, perceived tougher guys like Matt Barnes and whatnot. So they were a tough team. They never really got over the hump, but they were a tough team. And they were kind of where we wanted to get to or beyond. Chris Paul had I don't know if you remember that he had the State Farm commercials, and Steph Curry was his little sidekick. So we went into those games. I started to notice, like, we had a lot of guys that would get uptight going into those games. Like with the Clippers, it was just, they intimidated us for some reason. And we'd go into the game and look up at quarter time and we'd be down 18, and basically our faces would be blank and the game would be essentially over, right? So once I finally got back out there for, I think, the last 30 games of the season leading into a playoff run, we played them in LA, and we were down 10 or 15 points in the fourth. The game was close to over, and I remember DeAndre got a deep catch and he was about to dunk it, so I wrapped him up pretty hard, like just gave him a hard foul, put him to the free throw line. And he gave me a shove, and that's the highlight you're referring to. And I was like, nah, man. Like, I went straight back at his throat and pushed him back, and he stumbled back. And without touting my own horn, I think that was the moment where it was like, no, fuck you guys. Like, we're fighting you now. Like, this is going to turn. This table's going to turn. Like, this Lob City shit and all the stuff that you've been doing to us the last couple of years. I mean, I'm not going to mention one of my teammates, but one of my teammates would go into that game in a panic. He would struggle going into it because he just never played well. He'd get dominated in his position. And then it was like, to all those guys, it was like, no, we're not doing this anymore. And then it turned quickly after that. We played them in the playoffs the following year, I think it was. They beat us in a 7-game series. And then after that, it was over. Like, Steph was like, nah, I'm not your little brother anymore, CP. It got awkward between them two because CP Chris Paul had Steph as his little brother, and Steph was like, nah, you're my little brother now. Like, and then I don't know if you remember, he made him fall over on that one crossover and hit the jumper. And then I started matching up on Blake and played him really well. And then we just never lost to him anymore after that. And then ended up winning a championship, and their team got blown up. So I'm not sure if you remember that phase because you were with probably Dallas at the time, but it was a big cultural change for us in Golden State.
Hey, look, at some point you got to stop taking it, right? And you got to start, sort of putting up a stand, or it's going to happen. It's going to happen repeatedly without question. No doubt. I got a fight story. I don't think I ever told anyone this one. And this could be story time with Pro, actually, but I don't know. Maybe, we'll see what happens. But so we were playing Houston. It was a few years ago. It was back-to-back at Houston and then the next day against us at home. So we play at Houston, and I get there usually a couple hours. I'm usually the first one on the court with the young guys in pregame. So we're working out. Usually in a city, they'll have a couple of rebounders for you, to rebound balls. I mean, to be honest with you, a 30-minute workout will, if I'm rebounding, will last. You'll get about 3 shots up because by the time I wobble off to get the ball, I can lose 40 pounds by just running after the ball once. But so there was nobody there on our side for like the first 45 minutes. And I don't care if they're not going to be there, just sometimes scheduling, but an assistant coach on Houston was shooting around and he had 3 rebounders shooting around. And I'm like, what the fuck? Are you serious? And cause I take that stuff real serious. Like we had as you know, Bogues, we had like 12 interns in Dallas. Yes. So they rebound, pass.
They hated you. They
hated me for sure. They loved me and hated me.
Oh, you'd break their nuts nonstop, man. The shit was hilarious.
Without question. And so we had to rebound ourselves basically the whole time. Now, I don't know if the coach knew or didn't know, but I was fucking pissed. Because all our guys, all our assistants had a rebound, and it's just not professional. I made sure every game there was 2 to 4 rebounders to rebound for the other team when they came in our building, because I want the assistant coaches just to pass the ball and let our guys do that stuff for them. So nobody, and I'm fucking pissed. I can care less about wins or losses, Bogues. You know that.
It's the finer things.
Food on the plane, busting balls, and just trying to help our young guys get better. Those are the only 3 things I really give a fuck about. And now the next day they came in, I met with our interns. I said, if one of you motherfuckers grab 1 rebound, I want you to sit down in the stands while they fucking get their own rebounds. And I said, if one of you guys get a rebound, you're going to be fired, or you're just not going to do anything. You're going to sit down for the rest of the year. So they don't rebound. Now, when we play back to back, we usually we don't do a shoot around the next day. We usually meet at the arena and do shoot around in our gym that's inside the arena. So Houston starts getting pissed because they see all these basically interns that should be rebounding for them sitting down. And they said, nah, we're not rebounding for you. So Trevor Ariza and some guys, Trevor Ariza especially, gets fucking pissed. He's kicking balls into the upper deck. He's swearing at people. He's just pissed that he's like, no one's getting his rebound.
His workout's all messed up. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the game, I forgot when, but
I was there, man. I was there for this, you dumb fuck. I was there for this. I remember this. Keep going, though. I remember this story. I can chime in a little bit. Go.
So he gets in a fight with Salah Mejri for one reason or another. I never really got the true story, but he was pissed, beyond pissed, to the fact that he got thrown out. And then after the game, he's in our tunnel, near our offices, waiting for fucking Salah to come out. But ironically enough, I could have started that, but yeah, so that was. I
remember it. So we're in the game, and Salah mumbles at the best of times, and he's got a thick accent. He's from Tunisia, right? And he gets into it with Trevor, and he mumbled something under his breath, and I think Trevor thought he said something about his mum, right? So he's like, "What did you say about my mum?" And Salah's like, "I did not say anything about your mum." And he's like, "What did you say about my mum, man?" And then I guess after 2 or 3 back and forth, Salah was like, "Okay, fuck your mum." so Trev's just gone like crazy, gets thrown out of the game. So I walk out of the locker room, and right outside our locker room door, Trevor Rees is sitting in his full game gear, in his shoes, socks, everything, just sitting in a chair. So I walk out, I'm like, I kind of know Trev. We had battles when he was in Houston with Golden State, and we have a mutual respect. We got into it heaps of times, going back and forth because I was moving on screens and laying him out, whatever. But Trev, man, you all right, man? He's like, yeah, man, I'm good. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, go and get Salah for me. And I'm like, come on, dude, don't do this, man. I said, it's not worth it. The league's going to fine you $100,000, $200,000. Bro, it's not worth it, man. Just go. And he's like, go and get him for me. So I walk back in. I'm like, look, Salah, man, just go out a different, in our locker room at Dallas, you could go through 2 or 3 different doors to get out of there. I said, dude, just go through a different door, man. The dude's waiting for you at the front. I don't care. I will go and mess him up. I don't care. You know how Salah is. So he fires back up. I'm like, oh God, here we go. So I come back out. This is me. Like, my reputation in the league is starting fights. I'm trying to play peacemaker. I'm like, Trev, just go, man. Just get on your bus, dude. Like, it's not he didn't mean it. The guys barely speak, English is his second language and all that fun stuff. And it's funny you bring that up because he sat there for a good 30 minutes. He didn't leave. So
oh my God, yeah.
I ended up going I said, oh, all right, cool. I've done my good grace. I've tried for 10, 15 minutes and I left, and I guess they ended up getting Salah through a side door and it was all forgotten about. But it's funny you bring that up because that was a hilarious story.
I was going to send him to Mark Jackson's church to calm down, but that shit didn't work.
You would have got more playing time if you did. Last question comes from Angus in Brisbane. Obviously, a lot of the league gets high, as in weed, but how often are players high during practice, weights, games? Any stories of a player hiding out in a locker room trying to light it up? So I didn't see a lot of it kind of point blank. Like there's no, guys aren't lighting up in practice or weights or games. There's an argument from the Players Association that it should be made legal. Look, I think it can't be any worse than putting anti-inflammatories in your body to make yourself feel good. And I think if you don't have a game and you want to have some weed the night before and chill out and relax, and I think just the pressure and the winning and the losing and the anxiety and the flying and the road trips and the lack of sleep, if you want to do that, I have no issue with it. I think the issue from the league's point of view is if you make this legal, you're going to get guys playing high. It's going to happen, and that's something that then you've got to figure out and deal with. Like, I can guarantee you there'll be some guys that are smoking the day of a game, and I know it used to happen back in the day in the NBL, back in the 2000s. I had a couple of teammates tell me that a few guys coming from predominantly American guys would be just smoking a doobie on game day, and it was kind of the normal thing to do. So I think it's a good thing for your mind and body, and people really enjoy it. Like I said, I think anti-inflams are much worse for you, especially long term. But I think the issue is on a game day. Not only that, then guys, let's say they have it and they have to drive home, flying in from a city, and they maybe smoke a joint or something, getting off the plane, they're going to go to drive. So there's all those issues to deal with. But if you're in the comfort of your own home, you don't have a game, I have no issue with it. What about yourself, bro?
Yeah, I don't really have. I had one story though. No one actually smoked weed, but we had. Remember Ricky Davis?
Yeah, I remember Ricky Davis.
So Ricky Davis is from what I've heard, was a huge weed smoker, right? So in Boston, in the locker rooms, I would always hang out with this guy Johnny Joe, who was the equipment guy, who was fucking hilarious. One of the funniest guys I've ever met in the NBA, and we would always hang out. And before games, Red Auerbach, before he passed away, would come and sit in Doc Rivers' office and talk to Doc. Just talk, shoot the shit and smoke a cigar. So Ricky Davis walks by the door and he goes, "Yo, Red, blaze up, dog." And he gave a peace sign and walked out of the gym. I lost it. I thought it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Imagine telling a Hall of Fame, best coach, best GM ever, blaze up, and this guy's like, Red just shook his head and just like, what the fuck? It was pretty fun. That's great. Yeah, but I never really have many weed stories at all about guys playing high.
I mean, it's getting more prominent. Like now, it's in those, what are they called, the pens that they smoke out of those vape pens. I think they can put some sort of seeds in there now, so it's changing. But
edibles too.
Oh yeah, the edibles. Who was that? Dion Waiters in Miami. Didn't he eat a bunch of edibles and get on the plane and was like trying to fly the plane and shit?
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, give me a fucking break. Give me a break. But yeah.
I mean, look, like I said, I think it's a matter of time before someone's high on a game day and does something stupid. But predominantly when you're high, you're probably moving a bit slower, so it'll be pretty noticeable.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps up Q&A. We'll get to story time with Rogue, Bogues, and Pro, but I'll do a decent one. It's nothing too crazy or funny. It's my first road trip in the NBA as a young fella. We go, so Tony Kukoc and Irvin Johnson were my vets. I sat next to Tony on the plane. He was a guy I looked up to as a kid, so it was kind of surreal to me. And I still remember we were flying to, I don't know where it was, might have been Philly or somewhere for our first regular season game. And I kind of said, "Where are we going? Where's team dinner? Where's the team meeting? What are we doing?" And he turned around and just laughed in my face and said, "See you tomorrow at shoot around." So that was my welcome to the NBA. I mean, coming from college in Australia where everything's structured, team buses to the hotel, to team meals, to team meetings. The NBA, it was in your face, individual when you're away from the court. It was do what you got to do. Some guys like doing this, some do that. Get your own meal, room service, go out to dinner. And that was pretty confronting as a young fella coming out of college where everything was structured. So that leads me into a kind of an interesting story about how superstars perceive themselves at times. And I had Michael Redd on my team throughout my early stages of my career. He just signed a max deal And he was, for the most part, a pretty humble guy, but I think got lost in his stardom a little bit. We get on the team plane, and the way the team planes were set out back when I was younger was there's tables that were eventually used for poker or dominoes or cards, but these tables would have food set up on them. So there'd be two tables in each aisle at the front and then one in the middle. Well, Michael Redd used to use one of those tables. That was his seat, his assigned seat that he kind of had dibs on for the year. So he would sit right in front of the food. Everyone would get their food and they'd clean the food off, and then eventually that would be his table. He'd play video games or do whatever he did on that table. So I used to sit next to him right over his left shoulder. So I'm sitting there one day, and you'll like this, Pro, because it involves food mainly, but
Oh, thanks.
he's sitting at the food with the table. He pushes the call light for the stewardess. Are you allowed to say that these days? Flight attendant, sorry, don't write us letters. The flight attendant comes out, gets to him, and he basically made the flight attendant plate up the food, right? So I'm sitting there, and this is the first or second year in the league. I think it was my first year, and I was like, Mike, come on, man. Are you serious? He's like, what? I'm like, you're sitting at the table with the food, man. Like, did you really just call over a flight attendant to plate up the food that's right in front of you? And that was kind of my foray into dealing with a max player. So pretty interesting. I mean, superstars do get catered to a lot, and it's kind of a funny story, but I gave Michael Redd shit about that for the rest of his, whenever I saw him, like I'd be like, hey man, you need me to get you anything? You want me to put you, whenever I had his water bottle, you want me to pour that water bottle in your mouth? Like, you know what I mean? Just nonstop railing on him. And he didn't really know how to take it because of my stupid Australian sense of humor. And he didn't know if I was giving him shit or really trying to help him. But I'm sure you have similar stories, Pro, but that was one that stuck out for me.
Well, Bogues, for me, it's, I would never do that. I would never, ever, ever, ever do what Michael Redd did. Because I would never have a situation where my food would actually go cold. I don't know. There was so much hijinks on planes and stuff.
Yeah, there is, but it's just, I mean, look, I don't think Michael meant any malice by it, but it just, when you look at it from afar, it's like, I guess those everyday people that you don't think too much about, the flight attendants, the trainers, the people that are carrying your bags, I guess there are some stars out there that sometimes lose sight of that and forget how, that they're important people in the role too, and you can somewhat belittle them without even knowing you're doing it sometimes.
Well, the problem that arises, Bogues, is like NBA players, and I guess most pro athletes, for the most of their lives, from like 10 years old on, it's all, no offense to them, but mostly it's all about them. They've got people around them that do most of the stuff for them. They got people who cook for them, clean for them, do their laundry for them, drive for them. So they don't really think of it, especially when they're on an NBA plane on a team, when the team people, it's not their job to clean up for them either sometimes, so like he probably didn't think much of it. Now there are some players that probably, they do it on purpose. Yeah, I've seen that happen,
yeah,
but like
same.
most players, because everything's centered around them, even the role players, it just, there were stars everywhere, and that's sort of their life that they've, they got all these people around them that do everything for them. So,
and it's a hierarchy. It's a hierarchy for everyone out there listening. So when you get on a team plane and everyone's getting their food, the max guy's getting his meal first, and then it trickles down to who's making what money. That's how petty it gets. When you go into the training room for a massage or to get your ankles taped, if there's a young fella on there and you're the max guy, you're kicking him off, come back later. This is me now. That's just something that's always been part of it, I guess. And it's just interesting, when you come in blind from college and how structured college is, especially where it's very regimented and you're taught to be respectful of everyone. It just becomes a hierarchy based on going on Hoops Hype and seeing who earns the most money on the team.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And also, you're talking about Lob City. Well, my nickname in the NBA was Blob City. So, that's something I lived up to on a daily basis, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud of it.
We'll leave that with the people. Thanks, Pro, for joining us again. Episode 3, Rogue Bogues on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Another good week, Pro. We haven't been cancelled yet. Hopefully, it doesn't happen next week.
Yeah, hopefully, of my 7 followers, I don't get canceled, so I'm good.
Cool, man. Thanks. We'll see you next week.